I'm David Yager, President and CEO of the University of the Arts, and I'm here today with the Program Director of Graphic Design. Angela, I'd like to talk a little bit about big picture first in terms of the way design has really changed over the last number of years, partly because of, I think, the introduction of technology, partly because maybe of scale, and I think partly because designers are just thinking bigger about where they can play a role, and partly because I think the public is starting to actually recognize when things are done by designers versus just done.
It's really true. The field of graphic design has always been linked like this with technology, from the very beginning of its recognition as a profession. For a while, it wasn't even a profession. It was just something that your printer did for you. You went into the printer and you said, I need a wedding invitation. He put it together. Usually it was a he, and that was that. So as printing technologies, as screen-based technologies, as all of that kind of came more and more into the picture, graphic design just kind of kept stepping up with it. And now we just have so many more options. And it's really still an idea-based, skill-based profession. Concepts are always the most important, but now we just have a lot of ways to get the idea out into the world. People are used to multimedia, they're used to big screens, they'll pay for a ticket to go see a concert at a stadium and they'll spend the whole time watching the Jumbotron. They're having both experiences at once. So I just think it's a tremendous time to be a designer. There are so many ways we can really get the word out. It's all about communication.
So many times I find students, which surprises me sometimes, has a narrow take on things than faculty or the programs. And in many cases, I've found that students think about the tools and the process and don't necessarily come in understanding the concepts and ideas that are much more important before you get to what the product is going to be. And they're very product-oriented.
They're afraid of making mistakes. They don't want to make something ugly. They want to make something beautiful. I keep saying to students, I don't care if you make something ugly, if you learn something in the process. It's about your ideas. Anybody can make something that's really polished. We don't really teach software per se, because the software changes every 2 minutes. As the minute you get out of school, you're going to need to learn new software. So if you always have the good ideas, you'll always be able to get work and to do work that's not only meaningful to you, but maybe actually might make a difference in the world.
So how do you get them to generate what I'll say in this broad term, ideas? How do you get them to articulate, to take an idea and then, sort of move it along in a way that makes sense, that they don't come to a conclusion, but the idea generates ideas, the ideation of ideas?
The ideation part takes time because, they're very young. They've just come from high school when they start out, and that's not something that's really taught in high school. So a lot of repetition, a lot of iterations, and my favorite 2 words in design are what if. What if it was bigger? What if it was smaller? What if it was blue? What if you change your topic entirely? And just to really keep thinking almost like a tree, like just branching out, and make the free associations, What are you interested in? Can you bring that into your work in some way? That's how you get really interesting work. And sometimes there's a great idea that just doesn't go anywhere, and that happens too. And sort of learning how to work around that is a really big part of design, I think.
Well, that happens to all of us. We just have to always learn to work around it.
Right, kill your darlings, right?
Exactly.
Kill them.
It's a tough thing to do sometimes.
Oh, terrible.
But you got to learn how to do it.
Yeah.
So what about as we start moving into immersive and, newer technologies, and how do you see the role of the designer and the design student playing in that space? And a simple answer would be, well, they're a designer, they should play in every space, and I understand that, but specifically, immersive starts to create a whole nother kind of way, and augmented reality starts to create a whole nother way that is going to be very, let's say, common at some point and used a great deal. How do we bring our students, how do you bring your students, into that world, expose them, and, make the tools not important, because initially they're always so seductive. Mm-hmm. And then once you start using them, hopefully you just get to a point where they're just another tool and you can move on.
Well, a lot of them already have experience in immersive media because a lot of them are gamers, so those students just jump right in. Others are much more reluctant. They do have this idea that graphic design is the book and the poster and maybe the website. And it's just really imperative on us to help them see that this is a way that you can really engage people, that whatever idea you have might be better in the air around us, so to speak, in a virtual environment than it would be as a flat, static thing. And I think it's just exposure. It's like, we take them to the Center for Immersive Media. We say, here's the tools, play with it. What's your idea? How can we make it happen in this other way? Does it do the same thing in this other media? Does it do something entirely different? Does it allow your idea to keep growing? And I think we just keep impressing that upon them. Like, we had a student last semester who said, how is this graphic design? And, I just basically said, it's systems. Design is systems. This is just another way you can do it. And maybe it's more effective. And if not, go back to what you were doing before.
Right. I'm a lot older than you, and I remember when we would be rubbing letters for typography.
Oh, letter set.
And when people said we're going to switch to using technology, multiple people, I thought were going to have heart attacks, both faculty and students at the time, when you weren't hand doing your type or doing rub type. So there's always a change, and
That's
and
right.
I think it's really good.
Yeah, I think one of the things we try to impart to the students is you have to have the mindset to always embrace change. Just try it, And then, sometimes retro things come back. Like we had somebody come in and do a Letraset workshop, and the students were so thrilled. They were absolutely besides themselves, and it was just like, well, I remember doing this on deadline, and it was not fun
Yeah,
because,
exactly. Or if you made a mistake.
Constantly, 'cause if it was late and you were tired and you're, terrible.
So switching the subject a little, you and I have talked about this somewhat, and I think there's always hopefully something good out of something negative, and COVID being something we've all lived through the last couple of years. And I know we've talked about how some students have excelled with remote learning, while others might not have. But it's created a different kind of leveling of the playing field in some cases. Could you talk about your experience?
Sure.
with that?
In terms of the students, we have really had to try to meet them where they are. Understanding that they're at a point in their lives where they don't have much life behind them. They had their childhood and now they're in college and it's not what they expected. And there can be a level of disappointment, which I totally understand. From a faculty standpoint, it can be really tough because you can't read the room when you're on Zoom. The positive things, though, are that we can get teachers from all over the world. We can do like a one-day workshop with somebody in Africa if we feel like it. We can have so many more different kinds of guest critics, like just with different cultural backgrounds, different different kind of practices. And I think that kind of ability to just reach out to whoever we want, it's almost like a dream situation where, like, I would love to get this guy in to talk about how he developed this typeface, but, he lives in Zimbabwe. No problem, So I think that has been really, really good for all of us to just be able to have access now.
On the other side, I think we've also talked that many designers these days work independently in their own house. And there's nothing that unusual for a student to now be working in their house, and it's not a bad experience for them, although they might not feel that, but it is an experience that they might be able to then capture for later on in their own studios.
For sure. I mean, I think a lot of us have realized that without the time of a daily commute, you suddenly have a longer day to yourself, which is awesome. I'm kind of a fiend for efficiency. I just really think that our time is, the one thing we'll never get back again. And truthfully, I'd say maybe 2/3 to half of our students end up doing something entrepreneurial, freelance or whatever. And so you do need to get used to sort of how do you have a work day? It's different for everybody, but just getting used to having a Zoom meeting, having proper lighting, how to share your work in advance so that people can see it and react to it more, during the meeting in a more timely way instead of having to look at it and think about it and come up with an answer on the spot. So it's all becoming part of professionalism at this point.
Well, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much. This has been really fun, lovely to speak with you.
Great.